Hey guys, welcome back to my sewing room. I'm Kelly and you found me here on Pick and Stitches, and I cannot wait to jump into the latest Sew Sampler box. This pattern is called Rain Lilies and we get to use this fun hexy ruler. So I'm going to show you all my tricks. So let's jump right on in.
Okay guys, so first we're going to start with our background fabric. I'm using my Stripology ruler and I will go ahead and link that in the description. I cut the 0 line and then a couple other big strips and I run out of ruler. So then we'll just bump everything over and make some additional cuts. Now one of the really important things when you're using the Stripology ruler is to get through all the layers. As you can see, I struggled a bit there. You want to have a nice sharp blade and you want to make sure that your folds are really straight. And now I've got all my strips for this project and we'll start to cut these apart. Now first I'm just going to take off that end and then I'm going to start to work the ruler. So we're going to use this bottom line here and I'm going to go ahead and throw some tape on this ruler quite a few times in this video to help keep my brain straight. And we're just going to take those little corners off on the edge because that's really going to help us line them up. And you can see here I switched to this Sewjo Daily mat. I really like that it rotates. It makes keeping the ruler right on my piece where I want it very easy. So again, here my tape is going to help me out. I'm just flipping that ruler over so that it is oriented the right way, and we'll just work my way through all of these different edges. So we're going to line up. That'll be really easy to tell if you've got it on the right section because your angle will match up. So I'm just flipping that ruler over every other time and just go slow. This is going to be one of those kind of go slow projects. Okay, and this is my last little piece, and as you can see I don't quite have enough to do one more piece, so that just goes in the scrap bin. And I've got all of my pieces here and I cut 9 out of this one strip. So now we'll go ahead and do the rest of our pieces. Again, I'm using that tape to help me out. I'm going to go ahead and move it to this other line, and now I'm going to be making these triangular shapes. So first I'm going to use the bottom and then I'm going to have to use that side angle. So you'll have to flip your ruler around, and there's me kind of thinking through it a little bit, and I'm just going to make that shape onto my ruler here with both pieces of tape to keep my brain straight. Now you do have to rotate it around to get to that other notch. You'll kind of see me try out a couple different processes here. It's whatever's comfortable, but I do like having those notches on all 3 of the corners. So don't skip that step if you want to make it easier to put your pieces together a little bit later on. Now here I'm trying just to use that left-hand corner so I can just slide my ruler straight over and I don't have to rotate it. That seemed to work out a little bit better, but again, just trial and error and see what works for you. But the tape on the ruler really helped keep my brain straight so that I wouldn't cut it in the wrong orientation. Okay, so I'll start to count these out. I like to make mine into stacks of 10 just to keep it straight in my brain. So here I'll make a row of 10 and count those out, and then a second row of 10. Often I miscount and have a lot of extra pieces, and that just makes it so I don't have to come back and do it again later. So on this one I've got 23.
Okay, so this shape is going to be our full hexagon. It's probably going to be the easiest one for us to all cut out. So I'm just going to line up my edges, top and bottom, and make sure that this line is going right, left.
And I'm going to be using this Sue Daily cutting mat. I do really love it, but it is not something that you have to have. Just makes life a little bit easier, especially when you're cutting something out like this that needs a fair amount of cutting. So we're only going to need 16 of these for the table runner, so this should go pretty fast. So the next one I'm going to line up right on that corner because I want to make sure that I get all of my cuts. I think there's going to be a little bit of discard at the end. Now here you can see I kind of overcut this corner. So I want to make sure that I'm going to leave that off when I move it along. This one I didn't overcut, so it's okay. Okay. So I'm going to bump over just a hair to leave that little section off. And it probably would be eaten up in my seam allowance, but I don't want to have a hole in my quilt when I'm done, so I'm going to just be extra careful there. Okay, now here I got lucky. I actually cut way further than I meant to, but it is exactly right on line. So I just carried this line out straight. You cannot guarantee that you would do that. I think if I tried to do that, that I would wiggle this around and then this next cut wouldn't be straight. So I definitely would not do that on purpose, but it's not always a loss if you do. Okay, so that's our 8. So we'll move on to the next piece. Okay, so now we're going to make similar shapes with our charm squares. I did go ahead and starch these so you can see they're more narrow from right to left than top to bottom. So in the way that I have it oriented right now. So what I want to make sure is that I'm going to cut this in half and I'm going to get 2.5 inches on this side and 2.5 inches on this side. And of course, this block is now going to only be like 4 3/4 if you count every last little stitch of that pinking edge, probably more like 4.5 if you really square it up. So, but this direction, right, left, I still have my full 5 inches. So what I'm going to do is just cut these in half at 2.5, and I'll cut a couple of these. What other color should we do? Oh, this one. Again, wider right to left. You just want to double check that because as I pulled these off the starch rack, if I wasn't super careful, they may have gotten oriented the other direction. Okay, so now I have some pieces to work with. We're going to get our hexi ruler again, and we're going to make 2 different cuts. So I'm actually going to separate these into 2 different stacks. I'm not even sure if we're going to use them all yet, but that's just how I'm going to approach it. So I've got my flat edge at the bottom. I'm going to take my ruler with my line on the bottom. So where's something white? Here we go. Okay, so as you're looking at your ruler, the line is offset to the bottom here. So that's going to line up with my straight edge. So this big line with my straight edge, and you're going to have the diamond over here on your right-hand side. So I'm going to bump this over until there's enough for me to cut a little bit off on both sides. And then I'm going to cut that side. While I'm here, I have the tiniest little bit of pinking edge. I'm just going to take that off. You don't have to worry about that, but it'll bug me because it won't stack easily. Okay, so that's our first cut. So we had the line across the bottom, and we cut this left-hand side with my diamond sitting over here on the right. Now I'm going to rotate my diamond so that it is one turn. And I'm going to line up this line just so we can all see it. So I'm going to line up against that line with this edge. So once I have it lined up there, now I'm going to cut this side. So I'm making a diamond shape out of these. So now I've got one of my diamonds. We're actually going to make 56 of these. So let's do one more together. Again, I'm going to use this bottom edge with my straight edge. I'm going to make sure there's a little bit hanging off over here on the left, and my diamond is on the right, this diamond shape right here. And then after I get it where I want it, I'm going to cut this left-hand side only. And then I'm going to rotate my board back so that we're still looking at the same shape. Now I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to rotate it one rotation clockwise. And then I'm going to line it up again. So it's going to be this edge of this diamond shape. And I'm going to cut this side. So that's 2. Let's do it one more time. Bottom edge, straight line at the bottom. Move it over so I have a little bit on this right left, and my diamond is on the right side. Spin it around. Cut it off. Then I'm going to rotate my ruler 1 degree forward, and I'm going to line up this bottom corner now. Oops. Now I did not cut the pinking edge off of here when I was lined up the other direction, so you can see how that's hanging out over the line. So I'm just going to back up my ruler 1 turn. I'm going to line up with that bottom edge. This might be a little bit confusing. Remember, this was the corner we started with. And I'm going to bump it down. So I think it is important to cut that top edge off if you've got anything hanging off, because that will interfere with your shape. Okay. Let's do this one just to get one more quick run. All right, so now I'm going to cut across the top and those 2 sides. That should work better. Rotate my ruler forward once. Now I'm going to line up with that bottom edge. Okay, so now we have 4. We're going to need to make 56 of those. All these little pieces are making me crazy. So with our other side, we're going to do something slightly different. We're going to take our flat edge again, point that towards the bottom. We're going to take our ruler, just like we did last time. Take this out of our way. See if I can reuse that later. Okay, so now we've got this lined up just like we did last time. We're going to do that same first cut. So if you wanted to, you could go through your entire stack of both pieces and do this same top and first cuts. So we've started again exactly the way we did last time. This time, the only difference is instead of making that diamond shape, we're going to be making a triangle. So this is going to be super easy. We're just going to bump straight over, and then we've got our triangle shape. And it's that easy. So now we have our triangle. We're going to make 56 of those. We're going to make 56 of our diamonds. And I'm just curious if I could squeeze another one out if I wanted to. Let's see what it does. You know, sometimes using these charm packs, things get a little bit more complicated because you have just like one over and over again. Let's see, this goes this way. But it is nice to have the color diversity that you get in a charm pack. Yeah, so this one's a little bit small for me to get that second cut. I feel like if I was maybe a little bit more frugal with it, I might have been able to make it work, but that's pretty tight. So I can definitely get, can I get, I don't know. Can I get a 1.5 inch out of square? Probably before I cut on it. Yeah, I can get a, probably before I cut it, I could get a 1.5 inch square for the scrap bin out of that if I wanted to. But I cut it, so we'll set that one aside. All right, so let's cut the rest of these.
Okay, and here you can see when I was a little bit careful, I could really get those 2 out of each one, so that worked out well.
All right, so I decided to add in my little $16 cutting mat. I just realized that I was in filming, I kind of set up a little bit differently, and I was using this one over and over again. And I try whenever I can to use a cheap cutting mat if it's going to do the job and it's small. The smaller ones obviously are less expensive. It's going to keep all of those really heavy traffic areas condensed to this mat. And so if I need to, I can replace this mat for $16. And that makes me a lot happier than trying to replace a more expensive mat.
Okay, so now we have all of our pieces cut out. It did take a while. These little notches on the end kind of made it longer to cut on all of our corners. However, it's going to make the next step a whole lot easier to piece. So first, we're going to make two pieces that are shaped, where is it? Like this. So we're going to take a hexagon and two of our colored triangles, and we're going to place those on either side. So that kind of blends in with my ironing board. Now, all of these seams I did press open. So this is going to be one of those where you kind of have to go back and forth a lot to get all of your seams sewn. This one, you can do the first two together. So let's get our second one and we'll head over to the machine and stitch that together. So I'll take one of my hexagons and then two of my colored triangles. And we'll head to the machine. So when we look at our diagram, we just want to make sure that we're lining up with two opposite, not totally opposite, but like kind of the bottom side is how I would think about it. So this notch is really going to help you see where to line up that corner so that you're exactly where you need it to be. If you had just cut a triangle, you could center it, but I feel like this is a little bit more accurate. And I am using that 1/4 inch foot that I like so much. And I also swapped back to my Aurifil thread. I've been using the 60 Glide thread a lot. This is a poly thread and I really love it. However, since I'm pressing these seams open, I feel like the Aurifil doesn't tend to come unwound as often. So I've got my stitch length at about a 2, 2.5. So that's one corner. And now I know I want to do this corner over here so that they're opposite. So as long as your piece is looking like this as you're sewing it, you are good to go. That sounds like I might need to oil my machine. Okay, so now we're going to go press these. Okay, and since I am pressing these seams open, I do like to use this bar. I find that if I use the bar though, I have to press the seam open first. I used to always press them to one side and then try to press them open, but I found that I had a hard time using the bar. And like I said, I did starch these, so I am liberally using steam. My iron's not quite heated up, so it may take just a minute. There we go. There she is. Okay, so again, this is a block we're only going to need 2 of. So now I have my 2. We're going to move to the next one. Now this next one's a little bit more complicated. I say complicated, it's just more pieces. And some of this, as we start to piece it together, you'll see that you could take one piece of the first step and use it in multiple blocks. But I'm going to follow the instructions just as they're laid out so that this is kind of your first time through. You can be thinking it all through. So we're going to take a triangle that's a color. Then we're going to take a triangle that is white. And those are going to go together. Whoops, see, I'm doing it wrong. So this is the bottom. Then I'm going to line those up there. So I'm going to go ahead and take these over and sew them, but then my next piece is going to be sewn on here like this. So I'm just going to leave that here. We'll go sew this seam. So this is one of those steps. You know you're going to need several of these white and colors together, and it's only one side, so you can always flip-flop it until it's oriented right. So you might want to go ahead and sew all of these at the same time. And then you'd, of course, press them all at the same time, which would also be faster. Okay, so we'll press this open really quick. Now, here's where you want to make sure that you've got it oriented right. So we've got our triangle with the color pointed down, the white pointed up, and then our color coming in. So when I fold this on, it looks a little funny because it's not, you don't want to line it up this way so that it totally matches, because that would have you oriented wrong. So you want to line it up so that when you flip it out, it's going to be coming out in a straight line. I can't, guys. I just have to oil my machine. So this Juki only needs 1 or 2 drops here right behind this screw point, right here in the throat. And then there's 3 spots on the top. I've actually marked mine with washi tape because I have a tendency to try to put a dot of oil in the screw holes, and that's not what I want. Oh, I take it back. There's 4 on the top. Okay. So now that that's done, hopefully it will sound better next time. We'll go press this. Okay, so we'll press this. So that's why we wanted to have this seam already pressed open before we sew the second part on. Okay, so we are going to make 12 of these and then 12 of the bottom part. I'm going to go ahead and just do the bottom part so you can see it, and then I'll get my other 11 put together off camera. So that's our top part. Now we're going to take 1 white, 1 of our diamonds. Now this diamond is actually going to face this way. So that means that this triangle has to point down. My diamond is going to face this way, and we'll go ahead and put those together and know that I'm going to sew that seam. So here's where I had it. I know I'm going to sew this seam. I'm just going to flip it around so that it's the direction I like to use. And then actually, because these aren't going to interfere, we can go ahead and do the second white part for the bottom here. So I know it's going to be opposite of this one. And then we can press them both at the same time. Just save us 1 trip to the ironing station. Okay, so now I have both of these ready to press. So we'll get them pressed open. Okay, so now this is going to come together as our finished little block here. Now, because all of these seams are pressed open, they will not nest, which is not my favorite, but we are going to roll with it. So I know that my 2 white parts are going to make my diamond here. So what I want to do is make sure that this seam and this seam are aligned. And I am going to pin. I'm not typically a big pinner, but because these seams are pressed open, I just feel like they move on me a little bit more. That's why I like to cheat with a nesting seam, but it's not impossible. So we'll head back over to the machine and stitch this down. So still using that 1/4 inch foot. Everything looks good. I like how my seams are lining up. And this is a smaller project this month, so it is a little bit more fiddly, but you just want to make sure that your lines are pretty good. And that's the only one that I have to worry about on this part right now, and that looks great. So let's go iron it. Okay. So we'll get ready to press this one open. Give it a really good press. Let it sit under the clapper for a second. But that is this. Oops, let me orient it the right way so I'm not confusing. So this is our block now, and it's going to look a little bit funny because this 1/4 inch is going to go away. So it looks like it's not lined up. This is the only point that I'm really worried about. Same thing over here. This 1/4 inch is going to go away. So it is going to look a little odd right now. Okay, so that's one. We're going to make 12 of those. Then our next piece that we're going to make is using our hexagon again. This one's going to be really simple. We're going to put white across one corner and a color across another one. And we're going to make 6 of these. So going to be exactly opposite. So let's head over to the machine. Okay, I'm not going to pin this for placement. I'm just pinning it so that I know it goes on that corner. So I don't really care where it is. Well, that didn't work. I didn't pin it. I totally missed the second layer. Okay. So this one goes on this side. My daughter must have been sewing. My speed is down to turtle. So funny when somebody else comes and uses your equipment and you don't notice it until it's tweaked different. It's just like when they adjust your rearview mirror. That's better. Okay, so let's go press. Yeah, that Juki has like a way to not go full throttle. And so when my daughter sews, she usually slows it down so that she doesn't accidentally get rolling too fast. We have a little bit of a game going back and forth if we're both using the sewing room at the same time. Okay, so we're going to make 6 of these. We got a white corner and then our colored corner. And then the next piece that we're going to make is another more complex block. And this is where some of those, just adding the corner to one piece might make more sense later on. So basically I'm going to take my triangle. I'm going to have a triangle pointed down. I need to shuffle these up or I'm going to have all the same colors. There we go. Okay. And then between it, I'm going to have one of these. And then I'm going to have another one on the other side. So that's going to be our line. In fact, let me get a better color for you guys to see. Okay. So triangle, diamond, triangle, diamond. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those 3 together at the machine. And we're only going to make 3 of this piece. So you definitely have to like think through what you're going to make if you're going to do it all at once. With this being a table runner, it's probably, easiest just to go back and forth and try to do the math and figure out exactly what you need and then be wrong if you didn't have any extra fabric. But if you're making a big quilt of this, I would definitely take the time to count it. Okay, let's go press. I didn't do a very good job of holding that open before I hit it with the iron, but that's all right. Okay. Now, because this is all one piece, we know it's going to go directly to here. It actually doesn't matter which way you turn it. So if you have an orientation that you like better, and let's get this last piece on. Again, because it's one of the diamond pieces, as you fold it on, it's going to point down. So you just want to make sure you're not lining it up on the wrong side. We'll head back over to the machine. Okay, we'll press it open, and that's our top row of this little mini block. So this way, there we go. So again, this is going to look funny because you've still got your 1/4 inch seam that you're giving allowance for. So now we're going to make the bottom row. We're going to take a diamond, point it away, a triangle in the middle, and another diamond pointed away. Let's see. Maybe this one. And then our last piece is one triangle. Okay. Now, if you look at this and you look at your top row, let's take that top row back in here. If I flip this top row over, what does it look like? It's the same piece. So it says you're going to make 3 of these sections. But really, as you're making this first section, if you want to make 6, then they will match top to bottom when you flip it around. So again, that will save you a step. But again, I'm just showing this kind of step by step so that everybody can wrap their brains around it. And I'm not skipping over steps and making you crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and get these together. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sew the white ones onto here just to make life easy, press it, and then I'm going to come back and do this one. Okay. Okay, so now we've got our last piece and we know it's going to, what did I do? You know, it's going to go up there like that. So I'm going to flip it. Triangle's going to come down, or the diamond is going to come down. Okay, so now we've got our 2 pieces. Again, you could have made more of this top row and just use them interchangeably. Now we're going to line it up so that I have this big white diamond. I'm going to pin for these lines because again, they're not nesting. And we're done with this segment. But I'm really loving this quilt, you guys. It's coming together so far. You know, once you kind of get everything cut out and get over the pressing it open, it's really coming together kind of quick and it looks really tidy. And I'm a fast sewer and I always struggle with how slow do I want to go to make it look great, but this one's coming together. I'm really enjoying it. Okay. So now we'll stitch this side on and throw one pin up here just because I don't want it to fold over on me. Okay, let's check it out. Oops. So, diamond looks good. Let's go press it. It's funny, I always love how pretty a quilt that is pressed open looks from the back. Not that you ever see it again. I'm too impatient of a presser to really make it look that pretty on the back. So, this is our block that we just made. We're going to make 3 of these. Now we're going to do some easier pieces. We're going to just be making 2 colors and 2 whites. So we'll just sew 1 to each and head back here. Okay, right sides together, pick any side for this first go round. You do have to do right sides together though. So now we'll press these open. This is something we are going to make 6 of. So you really want to go ahead and make 12 of these. 1 white, 1 color. Okay, then I'm going to take my color and point it kind of angled down. And this one is going to come together. So we're going to be sewing between the color lines. So again, I want to make sure that I'm really lined up, and that's where these notches are just going to be a savior. So we're just going to line up with that notch. I say notch, it's where the end is cut off. So we want to make sure that both ends are lining up. And if they're not, you want to place it a little bit better. But there we go. Okay, so let's go sew that down. Okay, so we'll press it open. And this is one of those blocks that's going to look a little bit funny because you have, no 1/4 inch seam on several pieces. We're going to make 6 of these. So your color should come past, because that's going to be encased in our next seam. Okay, the next piece we're going to do is another super easy one. We're going to only make 2 of these. So we're going to take our hexagon and take one of our colors, and we're going to pick any corner and sew it on. Okay, so once we have that made, we're going to go through and just make all the pieces so that we have enough of everything. Okay, so I've sewn the other ones with just the white corner and one with the color for the remaining blocks. And now I'm going to come through and sew an opposite color on all of these. So this is where you can kind of save a little bit of time by combining some of those blocks. I'm just going to get a couple over here so I have a lot of variety, and off we go. Okay, now I've got all my opposites that are both colors. Not the same colors. I think there's going to be enough variety in this quilt. It probably really doesn't matter, but I'm trying not to put the same colors on the same block. But I sure do keep reaching for them. Okay, now we can go press all these at the same time and save us some back and forth. Okay, so I don't want to give away the pattern, but this top row is all kind of back and forth in a lot of different shapes. So if you have any extra pieces like I did that maybe you sewed and didn't need or were the wrong direction, you might be able to use those here. So I would just go slow. We're going to put together our very top row, but like this piece here, I know I can fit it in right there. So it's exactly the pattern I need with the diamonds facing the correct directions. So again, if you have some extra ones, I wouldn't rip it right away. I would see if you could maybe use it on this top row that's going to be a little bit back and forth. And in the spirit of not getting up and down 1,000 times, I will use my little seam roller over here, and then I'll press them both at the same time. And I'll throw a link in the description for it. The big important thing is whatever roller you get, you want it to be flat on the side, not bulging, because that's not going to give you as good of a press. Okay. So again, I'm just going to double check my placement. Now we do want to pay attention to where our 1/4 inch seam is here, because if you don't, your points are not going to match up. So you want to make sure you have a solid 1/4 inch seam for this whole project. Which is part of why I really enjoy this guided foot. Okay, so if you're at all worried about your corners lining up, I would definitely recommend the poke a pen method. So I'm going to get exactly into this corner. And you can see it a lot of times from the back when you've pressed open. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to go exactly onto that corner and then pin it. As you can see, my first attempt not pinning and not doing the poke a pen was terrible. So don't be dissuaded. Just take your time. Keep that nice and perpendicular. Now, I know I want to hit right there, and it actually looks like it is right where that green meets the white. So I know visually I can see that from the top. Okay, let's see if that one's any better. Yes, much better. So sometimes you just have to go back. Now, I didn't get a good seam starting there, so I'm going to hit this top edge again. Okay, so let's go press that. And I like to leave stuff like that in because I just want everybody to always know that, I'm not perfect. There are mistakes. And if you're making mistakes and you're getting frustrated, I suggest you just take a breath, step away for a minute, and know that all of us do it too. And if you're a perfectionist and you don't have problems like that, you probably aren't watching my channel. So, okay. So that was this one way out here. See, I'm talking instead of doing my thing. So now I'm going to hit these two. I'm going to do the same thing. Going to get my poke a pen. I'm going to find my corner. This is a small project, so as this will take a little bit longer than nesting seams, I think it's worth it to have a really good finished result. So let's go finish pinning this over at the machine. Okay, I can see it because of where that line is. Again, usually if you're pressing open, you can use that line, but sometimes you can't. So I always like to just double. Okay, so now all of that is sewn on. I've got my first piece, and I need to have a colored triangle, and I know this is what's going to go together. So again, I'm going to poke a pen. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and speed this up here. It's a whole lot of back and forth. We're going to make all of these rows and then make sure we've got them oriented the right way and sew them all together. So there's a lot of back and forth to the ironing station and getting all my corners lined up and loading a bobbin.
Okay, guys, I think this pattern turned out really cute. I do have to say, I probably used my seam ripper more on this particular project than I have in quite a long time. If you want your corners to match, you're going to have to go slow and pin and be very precise. But all that to say, I think it turned out super cute. And this was one of those patterns that for me, at least, it never really clicked in my brain. Like I had to keep referring back to the paper pattern. So take your time, go slow, and you'll end up with a really cute result. I think this would be a really fun like baby quilt. I think this would even be really fun to kind of remake, obviously not exactly with this ruler, but we could do these into English paper piecing, and then that could be a kind of on the go project. And I love that you can use your 5-inch squares, leftover pieces. This is definitely one that you could reuse out of your scrap bin. So I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. If you do, please hit that like and subscribe. It definitely helps me out a ton. And until then, guys, I will see you next time.